you're already exhausted. And the day hasn't even started. Not from working too hard, not from doing too much, but from something quieter, something most people never name. You give pieces of yourself to people who don't even notice. You argue with those who will never understand. You explain yourself to people who've already decided what you are. You shrink to make others comfortable. You apologize for things that aren't your fault. You say yes when everything inside you is screaming no. And here's the part that breaks you. You know you're doing it. You can feel yourself disappearing, piece by piece, day by day. Most people think the answer is learning to value yourself more, to believe you're worthy, to finally see your own worth. But what if that's the trap? The Buddha traced this exhaustion to its root. The problem isn't that you don't value yourself enough. The problem is believing there's a fixed self that needs valuing in the first place. That belief, that illusion, is what's been draining you all along. Over the next 3 hours, we're not building your self-worth. We're examining the mind that keeps searching for it. And near the end, we'll explore why karma doesn't work the way most people think, why it's not about deserving, but about something much more honest. If your peace was a temple, why do you let everyone walk through it with dirty feet? This isn't about becoming stronger. It's about seeing clearly what's been making you feel weak. The seeing itself is where freedom begins. There's a particular kind of chase that never ends. You work harder, achieve more, give endlessly, and still, the finish line moves. You look for proof of your worth in someone's eyes, in their words, in the way they choose you over someone else. And for a moment, when they do choose you, when they validate you, there's relief. But it doesn't last. By the next morning, sometimes by the next hour, the feeling returns, that quiet voice saying, "You're still not quite enough." This isn't weakness. It's not a personality flaw or a sign that something is fundamentally wrong with you. It's what happens when the mind believes it's incomplete and needs something outside itself to become whole. Watch how it works. Someone doesn't text back, and immediately the mind spins. What did I do wrong? Am I too much? Not enough? You replay conversations, searching for the moment you became unworthy of a response. Or someone offers criticism, and instead of hearing feedback, you hear confirmation of what you've always suspected, that you're not quite right, not quite good enough. The exhaustion comes from this constant measuring yourself against others, against who you think you should be, against some imagined version of yourself that never makes mistakes, never feels small, never needs reassurance. You become someone building a case against yourself, and the evidence feels overwhelming because the mind has been trained to notice every flaw, every failure, every moment of falling short. And here's what makes it so painful. You know, somewhere deep down, that this chase doesn't work. You've been chosen before, and it didn't fix the feeling. You've achieved things and the satisfaction evaporated by evening. You've had people tell you you're enough, and you didn't believe them. Because the problem was never actually about what they thought. It was always about the story running in your own mind. There's an old story from China, from the 9th century, about a monk who came to Master Joshu seeking the deepest teachings. The monk had traveled far to reach Joshu's temple. He had heard that this master could show him the way to awakening, could give him what he'd been searching for through years of practice and study. When he finally arrived, dusty from the road and eager to begin, he approached Joshu and said, "I have just entered the monastery. Please teach me." Joshu looked at him with calm, clear eyes. "Have you eaten your rice porridge?" he asked. The monk was confused. This was not the profound teaching he had expected. "Yes," he said, "I have eaten." Joshu nodded. "Then go wash your bowl." And in that moment, something opened in the monk's understanding. This story is so simple it seems almost empty. But that simplicity is the point. The monk came looking for something special, something extra, some teaching that would finally make him complete. He was like most of us, convinced that awakening, peace, wholeness exists somewhere else, in some future moment, in some teaching he hasn't yet received. Joshu didn't give him another thing to carry. He pointed him back to what was already here. "You've eaten. Now, wash your bowl. Do the next simple thing. Be present with what is." The monk's bowl was already complete. It didn't need to become a better bowl, a more spiritual bowl, a bowl worthy of a great master's attention. It just needed to be washed. And in the washing, if done with full presence, there is everything. Your life is the same. You come to these teachings, to these moments of reflection, looking for something that will finally make you enough. But you're like the monk, asking for teaching while standing in the middle of your own completeness. You've eaten your rice. Now wash your bowl. Be here, fully, without needing to be more than this. The feeling of not enough comes from a mind that's always looking ahead, always comparing, always convinced that wholeness exists somewhere other than here. But Joshu is saying, stop searching for something extra. Just be present with what's in front of you. This brings us to what the Buddha understood about this restless mind. The feeling of not enough doesn't come from reality. It comes from a pattern the Buddha observed carefully, the mind's tendency to take simple moments and spin them into elaborate stories about self and other, good and bad, enough and not enough. Here's how it happens. Something occurs. Someone doesn't respond to your message. You make a mistake at work. You see someone who seems more confident than you. These are just events, neutral in themselves. But the mind doesn't experience them as neutral. Immediately, perception arises and labels the experience. The mind takes the neutral event and layers meaning onto it. This means something about me. This reveals something about my worth. Then comes the proliferation. One thought leads to another, leads to another. They didn't respond. I must have said something wrong. I always do this. Why am I like this? Everyone else knows how to communicate properly. What's wrong with me? What started as a simple moment, no text response, has become an entire narrative about your fundamental inadequacy. And here's the crucial part the Buddha taught. This proliferation happens because of a deeper belief. The mind is convinced there's a solid, permanent self that can be judged as enough or not enough. This attachment to the idea of a fixed self drives all the suffering that follows. Every time you think, I am not enough, you're actually reinforcing two illusions at once. First, that there's a solid I, unchanging, permanent, separate from everything else. Second, that this I has some measurable quality called enoughness that can be evaluated. But when you look closely at your actual experience, where is this solid self? Your body changes constantly. Different cells, different sensations, different energy from moment to moment. Your thoughts arise and dissolve like clouds. Here one instant, gone the next, not one of them permanent. Your feelings shift throughout the day. Content in the morning, anxious by afternoon, calm by evening. Your sense of who you are changes depending on who you're with, what you're doing, even how much sleep you got. What you call yourself is more like a river than a rock, constantly flowing, never the same twice, with no solid thing you can point to and say, this is the essential me. And if there's no solid, unchanging self, then what exactly is not enough? The Buddha taught that clinging to the idea of a permanent self is the root of this suffering. Because once you believe there's a fixed you, that you must be defended, improved, proven. Every moment becomes a test. Every interaction becomes an opportunity for judgment. Every day becomes an exhausting effort to maintain the image of someone who deserves to exist. But this self you're trying so hard to prove, it's a pattern the mind creates through habit. These conditioned patterns arise based on past experiences and repeat until seen clearly. The pattern goes like this. An event happens. Perception labels it as threatening to self. The mind proliferates stories. Feelings of inadequacy arise. And the mind takes all of this as evidence of a real, solid self that truly is not enough. Then that pattern gets stronger, more automatic, until it's running in the background of almost every experience. But patterns can be seen, and in the seeing, they lose their grip. Right now, just for these next few breaths, notice something. As you're listening to this, is there any part of your mind trying to determine if you're understanding it correctly? Any subtle measuring happening? Am I getting this? Am I doing this right? Should I be feeling something different? That's the pattern. That's the mind's habit of turning even this moment into an evaluation of your adequacy. Can you just notice it without trying to fix it or make it go away? Not, I shouldn't be doing this. Not, I need to be more present. Just, there's that pattern again. The measuring mind. In that simple noticing, you're the awareness that sees it happening. And that awareness doesn't need to prove anything. It doesn't need to be chosen or validated. It's already here, already whole, already complete, like Joshu's bowl after the meal. You don't need to become more aware. You don't need to improve your awareness or make it spiritual or worthy. You just need to notice. Awareness is already present, already functioning, already seeing these words, hearing these sounds, feeling the sensation of breath moving in and out. This noticing is the beginning of freedom. Not freedom from ever feeling not enough again. That feeling will still arise because the mind has deep habits. But freedom from believing the feeling tells you the truth about who you are. Freedom from organizing your entire life around proving it wrong. The monk asked for teaching, and Joshu said, "Wash your bowl." He was pointing to something the monk already had, but couldn't see because he was too busy looking for something more. You are the same. Not broken, not incomplete, not fundamentally lacking. Just here, in this moment, like the bowl that's been used and now needs washing. Simple, present, whole. The chase for external validation was never going to work. Not because you don't deserve validation, but because what you're truly seeking can't be given by anyone else. It can only be recognized here in the simple presence that's been with you all along. You know that feeling when someone misunderstands you, and suddenly you're talking faster, explaining harder, trying to make them see what you actually meant. Your words pile up like evidence in a trial. You're presenting your case, showing your good intentions, proving you weren't trying to hurt anyone, or be difficult, or fall short of expectations. And with each sentence, you can feel your energy draining away. Here's what makes it so tiring. Most of the time, they've already decided. The person demanding explanations has often made up their mind about who you are, what you meant, why you did what you did. Your words aren't changing their view. They're just exhausting you. Watch how it happens. Someone judges your choice, and immediately you feel that pull, the need to justify, to list reasons, to make them understand it made sense. Someone questions your character, and you find yourself recounting your history, your struggles, your intentions, as if the right combination of words might finally make them see the truth. But the truth is, some people aren't interested in understanding. They're interested in their version of you, the one that fits their narrative, confirms their assumptions, justifies their judgment. No amount of explaining will ever be enough, because they're not listening to you. They're listening to the story they've already written. This isn't about them being bad people. It's about something more fundamental, the human tendency to see what we expect to see, to interpret through the lens of our own conditioning, to make others fit into boxes that make sense to us. When you understand this, something shifts. You realize that explaining yourself repeatedly isn't communication. It's a kind of begging to be seen correctly, understood fully, judged fairly. Deep in the forest monasteries of Thailand, there was a monk who lived simply in a small hut on the edge of a village. One morning, a villager passed by the monk's hut at dawn and saw a young woman leaving. By midday, the entire village was talking. By evening, they had decided the monk had broken his vows, betrayed his practice, proven himself to be a fraud. A group of villagers came to confront him. They stood outside his hut, voices raised, demanding he explain himself. How could he disgrace the robes he wore? How could he lie to them about his commitment? What did he have to say for himself? The monk sat quietly, listening. When they finished, he looked at them with calm eyes and said simply, "You have seen what you have seen." That was all. No defense, no explanation, no attempt to correct their perception or prove his innocence. Just acknowledgement of what they believed they witnessed. The villagers left, angry at his refusal to defend himself. They decided this silence was proof of guilt. For weeks they avoided him, spoke harshly about him, warned others not to support such a charlatan. Then one day, the young woman returned to the village. She had been walking through the forest at night, fleeing from a dangerous situation in another town. She saw the monk's hut, knocked desperately, asked for shelter until sunrise. He had given her tea, let her rest safely by the fire, and sent her on her way at dawn with food for her journey. Nothing more had happened. When the villagers learned the truth, they returned to the monk, ashamed. They apologized profusely, explained they had misunderstood, asked for his forgiveness. The monk looked at them with the same calm eyes and said simply, "You have seen what you have seen." In their misunderstanding, he hadn't defended himself. In their apology, he didn't need validation. Both their judgment and their praise moved through him like wind through an open window, present for a moment, then gone, leaving no mark. This story isn't about being cold or distant. It's about understanding something the Buddha taught. Not everything requires a response. The monk could have explained. He could have told them about the woman's fear, her need for safety, his commitment to compassion for all beings, regardless of appearances. He could have presented evidence, built his case, proven his innocence. But he understood what most of us forget. Explaining doesn't create understanding. Understanding comes from someone's willingness to see clearly, to question their assumptions, to look beyond their first interpretation. If that willingness isn't there, your words just become more evidence for the story they've already decided to believe. The Buddha himself practiced this kind of silence. When people asked him questions that couldn't be answered, questions designed to trap him in philosophical debates or force him into positions they could attack, he simply remained silent. Not out of arrogance or superiority, but out of wisdom. He understood that some questions aren't asked in genuine seeking. They're asked to confirm what someone already believes, to justify their judgment, to create conflict where clarity could exist. The Buddha taught that wise speech has 4 qualities. It must be true, beneficial, timely, and spoken with kindness. Notice what's not on that list. It doesn't need to defend you, prove you right, or change someone's mind about you. Sometimes the most loving thing to say is nothing at all. Not because you're too proud to explain, but because you recognize that this moment doesn't call for words. This person isn't in a place to hear you, or the explanation would only create more entanglement, or your peace matters more than being understood. This isn't about building walls or refusing to communicate. It's about recognizing the difference between genuine misunderstanding that can be resolved through conversation and fixed perception that no amount of words will shift. Think about the last time you explained yourself to someone who wasn't really listening. How did it feel afterward? Not relieved, usually. More tired, more frustrated. Because you were trying to hand them understanding, and they weren't interested in receiving it. The monk in the forest understood this. He wasn't protecting his reputation or proving his innocence. He was protecting his peace. He recognized that their judgment, while painful, was their story about him, not the truth of who he was. And that their later praise was also just their story, equally unrelated to his actual nature. Both the accusation and the apology moved through without sticking because he wasn't identified with either one. For the rest of today, try something. Notice when you feel the urge to explain yourself. Not when someone asks a genuine question. Answer those. But when you feel that pull to justify, to defend, to prove you weren't wrong or bad, or less than they think. Just notice it. You don't have to change anything. Don't judge yourself for wanting to explain. Just, there's that urge again. Feel where it lives in your body. Often it's a tightness in the chest, a pressure in the throat, a slight panic that says, they need to understand. They need to see the real me. And ask yourself gently, will explaining actually create understanding here? Or am I just exhausting myself trying to change a mind that's already made up? If you're someone who over-explains, you're not alone. Probably half the people listening right now just felt that tightness in their chest, that familiar urge to make others see their good intentions. It's not a flaw. It's a pattern that developed, often in childhood, when being understood felt like the difference between safety and rejection. But you're not that child anymore. You don't need everyone to understand you to be safe. You don't need to justify your existence to people who've already decided what to think. The freedom comes not from perfecting your explanations, but from releasing the need to give them. Like the monk in the forest, you can meet judgment with quiet presence. You have seen what you have seen. You can meet praise the same way. Neither one defines you. Neither one requires your defense or your gratitude beyond simple acknowledgement. This is what the Buddha meant by wise speech. Not more words, but right words at the right time for the right reason. And sometimes the right word is silence, not hostile or cold, but spacious and free. The peace you've been seeking through all that explaining, it was never in making them understand. It was always in understanding that you don't need them to. You've probably said yes when you meant no. Agreed to things that drained you because saying no felt cruel, selfish, wrong. smiled through conversations that exhausted you because showing your real feelings might upset someone. This pattern has a name, though most people just call it being nice. You sacrifice your own needs to keep peace with others. You carry their emotions, their requests, their expectations, all while your own life gets heavier and smaller. The exhaustion isn't from the doing. It's from the constant betrayal of yourself. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you're teaching yourself that your needs don't matter as much as their comfort. Every time you smile through discomfort to avoid awkwardness, you're confirming that your truth is less important than their ease. And here's what makes it so painful. You believe you're being kind. You think this is what compassion looks like, giving until you're empty, accommodating until you disappear, putting everyone else first until there's no you left to put anywhere. But watch what actually happens. You say yes to plans you don't want, then resent the person for asking. You take on more than you can handle, then feel bitter about the weight. You prioritize their feelings over yours, then wonder why you feel invisible in your own life. The resentment builds quietly, like water behind a dam. You don't mean for it to be there. You genuinely want to be generous, want to help, want to be the kind of person who shows up for others. But underneath the giving, something is dying. Your energy, your authenticity, your ability to feel joy in connection, because every connection has become a drain. And the people you're trying so hard to please, often they don't even know you're suffering. They take what you offer because you offer it with a smile, and they assume the smile is real. How could they know you're dying inside when you've become so skilled at hiding it? What makes this pattern so insidious is that it often started as something good. Maybe you learned early that being helpful kept you safe, that being agreeable made you lovable, that never asking for too much meant you wouldn't be a burden. Those strategies worked once. They protected you when you were small and had no other options. But now they're a prison, disguised as virtue. In the forests of northeast Thailand, there was a teacher named Ajahn Chah who understood this tension between compassion and self-preservation. A young monk came to his monastery, eager to practice, but struggling with discipline. He would miss morning meditation, forget his duties, break minor rules repeatedly. The other monks grew frustrated, watching him receive the same teachings they followed diligently, yet continuing to disregard them. After weeks of this pattern, several senior monks approached Ajahn Chah. "Teacher," they said, "this monk is disrupting the community. He doesn't respect the practice. He should be asked to leave." Ajahn Chah listened quietly, then asked, "Where else will he learn?" The monks were confused. "But he's not learning here," one said. "He keeps making the same mistakes." "Yes," Ajahn Chah replied. "And each time he makes a mistake, life teaches him something about the consequences of carelessness. If we send him away now, he'll carry these patterns to the next place and the next, never understanding why he suffers. Here, at least, he's surrounded by people who practice what he's struggling to learn." The monks were still uncertain. "But what about our practice?" another asked. "His behavior affects all of us." Ajahn Chah nodded. "This is also true, which is why he'll continue to follow the same schedule as everyone else. He'll receive the same teachings, face the same expectations. What he does with that is his choice, and the consequences are his to experience." Then Ajahn Chah said something the monks didn't expect. "But if his presence truly prevents you from practicing, then you must examine your own mind. Why does his struggle disturb your peace? Are you practicing for your own liberation, or for the satisfaction of seeing everyone follow the same path at the same pace?" The young monk stayed. Ajahn Chah didn't lower the standards or make exceptions. The rules remained the same, the schedule unchanged, the teachings consistent. But neither did he cast the monk out for being imperfect. And something remarkable happened over time. The monk continued to struggle, continued to fall short, but he also continued to practice. He saw his own patterns more clearly, because he wasn't exiled from the place that reflected them back to him. He learned slowly, painfully, through repeated failure and gentle correction. Years later, that monk became one of the most compassionate teachers in the lineage. Not because he was naturally disciplined, but because he understood struggle intimately. He knew what it meant to fail repeatedly and still be held in a container of firm kindness. What Ajahn Chah demonstrated was the possibility of holding two truths at once: care for the individual and care for the whole, including himself and the other monks. He didn't sacrifice the community's well-being to accommodate one person's struggles. But he also didn't sacrifice his compassion to maintain perfect order. He found the place where both could exist, where boundaries and kindness weren't opposites but partners. This story reveals something most people miss about compassion. Ajahn Chah didn't abandon the struggling monk, but he also didn't abandon the structure that supported everyone's practice. He held both, compassion for human weakness and respect for the boundaries that create safety for all. This is what the Buddha called the middle way. Before the Buddha's awakening, he tried two extremes. First, He indulged in every pleasure, seeking happiness through satisfaction of desires. It left him empty. Then he swung to the opposite extreme, severe asceticism, punishing his body, denying every need. This nearly killed him and brought no insight. Only when he found the middle path, neither indulgence nor punishment, did he discover freedom. He ate when hungry but didn't gorge. He rested when tired but didn't become lazy. He practiced with dedication but didn't destroy himself in the practicing. The same principle applies to how you relate to others and yourself. You don't have to choose between being a doormat or a wall, between sacrificing yourself completely or closing your heart entirely. There's a middle path where compassion flows but doesn't drain you, where you can be generous without disappearing. Think of it like this: a lamp can only give light if it has oil. If you pour out all your oil to fill everyone else's lamps, yours goes dark. Then you're no use to anyone, least of all yourself. But if you keep your lamp filled, you can share light endlessly without ever running dry. Thich Nhat Hanh taught this beautifully when he said, "Taking care of yourself is taking care of those you love." Not because self-care is selfish, but because you cannot offer from emptiness. You cannot give peace if you have no peace. You cannot share compassion if you show none to yourself. This doesn't mean becoming cold or self-centered. It means recognizing that your needs matter as much as anyone else's. That preserving your energy isn't selfish. It's necessary for sustainable compassion. The Buddha taught that all beings deserve compassion, and that includes you. Not as an afterthought, not if there's time left over after everyone else is taken care of, but as a fundamental part of the practice. When you abandon yourself to serve others, you're actually breaking the precept of non-harming. You're harming yourself, and that harm ripples out into everything you do. Look at Ajahn Chah's response again. He didn't let the struggling monk disrupt the entire community. He maintained the structure, the schedule, the expectations. But he also didn't cast him out for being imperfect. He held firm boundaries and soft heart at the same time. This is the balance most people never find. They swing between extremes, either giving everything until they collapse, or shutting down completely to protect themselves. But the middle path says you can stay open and boundaried simultaneously. You can love someone and still say no to them. You can care deeply about their well-being and still refuse to carry their responsibilities. You can be compassionate and still protect your peace. The key is learning to discern the difference between compassion and fear. Compassion says, I care about you, and I also care about myself. I'll help in ways that don't harm either of us. Fear says, I'll do whatever it takes to keep you from being upset with me, even if it destroys me. Compassion creates something sustainable. Fear creates resentment disguised as kindness. Before you say yes to the next request, try this. Take one breath. Just one full breath in and out. In that breath, ask yourself, is this coming from genuine care or from fear of disappointing them? Am I saying yes because it aligns with my values and capacity, or because I'm afraid of what no might cost me? You don't need elaborate criteria or complex rules. Just that moment of checking in with yourself before responding. Notice what happens in your body when you consider saying no. Does your chest tighten? Does anxiety spike? That physical response is information. It's showing you where fear lives, where the old pattern of self-abandonment wants to run the show. And notice what happens when you imagine saying yes from a place of genuine willingness versus obligation. One feels open, the other feels heavy. Your body knows the difference, even when your mind tries to rationalize. This isn't about never helping anyone or becoming someone who only thinks of themselves. It's about learning to give from fullness rather than depletion, from choice rather than fear, from wisdom rather than habit. The Buddha taught that wise compassion includes yourself, not as an afterthought, not as something you get to if there's energy left over, but as an essential part of the practice. Because if you're running on empty, your compassion becomes contaminated with resentment. And resentful giving isn't actually kind to anyone. When you give from obligation, the recipient feels it, even if they can't name it. There's a subtle tension in obligatory kindness, a barely perceptible resentment that poisons the gift. But when you give from genuine willingness, from a place of having enough to share, the giving becomes joyful. Both people feel nourished instead of drained. Like Ajahn Chah with the struggling monk, you can hold space for others' imperfection while maintaining what keeps you whole. You can be patient with their journey while respecting your own limits. You can love without losing yourself in the loving. If you're still here, breathing with this, thank you. We're about halfway through now. If you need to pause and come back later, do that. This isn't going anywhere. The teachings will be here when you return. I'm curious, is it quiet where you are? Or can you hear life happening around you? Traffic, or voices, or the hum of the world going about its day? Either way is fine. Adjust your position if you need to. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Take one full breath that's just for you. In the next section, we're going to talk about energy. Not the manifestation kind, not the cosmic kind, but something much more real and immediate. The actual attention and presence you give to your days and where it goes. But for now, just rest here for a moment. Notice that you're still breathing, still present, still here. You've probably noticed this. Some conversations leave you feeling lighter, more alive, even when they're difficult. Others drain you completely, even when they're pleasant on the surface. It's not always about the content or the person. Sometimes you can talk about heavy things and feel energized by the honesty. Other times you can discuss nothing important and feel utterly depleted. What makes the difference isn't mystical or mysterious. It's where your attention goes during those moments and what quality of presence you're bringing to them. Think of your attention like water in a vessel. You only have so much, and it flows toward whatever you focus on. Some things receive your attention and give nothing back. They're like cracks in the vessel, letting everything leak out. Other things receive your attention and somehow replenish you, as if the act of focusing on them generates more rather than less. Arguments that go nowhere are cracks in the vessel. Conversations where you're performing rather than connecting. Hours spent refreshing news feeds, each story pulling your attention into worry, or outrage, or comparison. Relationships where you're constantly proving yourself, explaining yourself, defending yourself. These aren't bad people or wrong activities necessarily, but they're places where your attention pours out without return, leaving you emptier than you started. Then there are moments that somehow give back. A conversation where someone really listens and you really listen back. Work that absorbs you so completely, you forget to check the time. Quiet moments where your mind isn't racing, but simply present with what is. The difference isn't the activity itself. It's whether your attention is scattered or gathered, whether you're fully there or split between 10 different concerns. Whether you're engaged or just going through motions. Most people live with their attention constantly leaking. Half present in every conversation because they're thinking about what comes next. Half engaged with their work because they're worrying about something that happened yesterday. Never quite here because here feels insufficient compared to some imagined elsewhere. And they wonder why they're always exhausted despite doing nothing particularly strenuous. It's not the doing that tires them. It's the constant leaking of attention in every direction. The mental energy spent being everywhere, except where they actually are. There's a story about this from Japan, about a Zen monk named Ryokan, who lived simply in a small hut at the base of a mountain. One evening, Ryokan returned from the village to find a thief inside his hut, searching frantically for something valuable to steal. But Ryokan owned almost nothing: a few robes, a bowl, some writing materials. Nothing worth stealing. The thief froze when he saw Ryokan in the doorway. He expected anger, confrontation, perhaps violence. Instead, Ryokan looked at him with gentle eyes and said, "You have traveled far to visit me, and I have nothing to give you." The thief was confused, wary, unsure if this was a trick. Ryokan removed his outer robe, the only thing of any value he possessed, and held it out to the thief. "Please, take this so you won't leave empty," handed. The thief grabbed the robe and fled into the night, bewildered by what had just happened. Ryokan sat down outside his hut, now wearing only a thin underrobe, and looked up at the sky. The moon was full, luminous, casting silver light across the mountain. He sat there for a long time, just watching the moon. Later, he wrote a poem. "The thief left it behind, the moon at my window." And then, another line, "I wish I could have given him this beautiful moon." This story is often told as a lesson in non-attachment, and it is that. But it's also a teaching about attention and what we have to give. Ryokan didn't have material wealth to offer. He could have felt shame about that, could have apologized for his poverty, could have felt diminished by having nothing valuable in conventional terms. Instead, he gave what he actually had: presence, kindness, and most importantly, his attention to what was genuinely beautiful in that moment, the moon. He didn't drain himself trying to give what he didn't have. He didn't pretend to be richer than he was, or apologize for his simplicity. He gave his robe freely, without attachment, and then turned his attention to what was actually abundant: the beauty of the night, the moon's light, the peace of that moment. The thief took material goods and left. Ryokan kept his attention on the moon and remained rich. Most of us do the opposite. We have the moon, we have this moment, this breath, this present experience, but we're too busy wanting what we don't have to notice, what's already here. We drain ourselves trying to give what we lack, while ignoring what we actually possess in abundance. The Buddha understood this deeply, and he taught a practice that's both simple and profound: right effort. Right effort isn't about forcing or straining. It's about directing your attention wisely, cultivating what serves your peace, and releasing what disturbs it. The Buddha described this as 4 practices: though they're really one practice with 4 aspects. First, prevent harmful thoughts and states from arising in the first place. This sounds difficult until you realize it's about awareness. When you notice the conditions that typically lead to worry, anger, or obsessive thinking, you can choose not to water those seeds. If you know that reading certain news sites sends you into spirals of anxiety, don't click. If you know that certain topics of conversation always lead to resentment, gently redirect. This isn't avoidance or denial. It's recognizing that you don't have to feed every mental state that wants to arise. Second, abandon harmful states that have already arisen. When you notice worry has already grabbed you, anger has already flared, or comparison has already started its work, you don't have to let it continue. This doesn't mean suppressing or denying what you feel. It means recognizing that you're caught in a pattern and choosing to release it. Sometimes that's as simple as naming it, "This is worry," and then deliberately shifting attention elsewhere. Third, cultivate helpful thoughts and states. Give your attention to what nourishes peace, clarity, compassion. When you notice gratitude arising, stay with it for a moment. When kindness appears, let it expand. When clarity comes, rest in it. Most people do this backwards. They give full attention to worry, let it elaborate and proliferate, follow every anxious thought to its conclusion. But when peace arises, they barely notice it before moving on to the next concern. The Buddha taught, whatever you frequently think about becomes the inclination of your mind. If you give most of your attention to worry, your mind becomes a worrying mind. If you give attention to what's actually okay right now, your mind becomes more at ease. Fourth, maintain the helpful states once they've arisen. This is where most people fail. They work hard to cultivate peace, then abandon it the moment it appears to chase the next problem. When you finally feel calm, stay there for a moment. Don't immediately think, "What should I do now that I'm calm?" Just be calm. Let it stabilize. Let your mind learn what calm feels like so it can return there more easily. These 4 efforts work together. You're not trying to control your mind or force it into some artificial state. You're simply directing your attention with wisdom away from what harms toward what heals. Think about yesterday. Where did most of your attention go? Not where your body was, but where your mind was dwelling. Were you present with what you were doing, or somewhere else entirely? Were you replaying old conversations, rehearsing future ones, comparing yourself to others, worrying about things not yet happened? And how did those mental patterns affect you? Did they make you more at peace or more agitated? More connected or more isolated? More clear or more confused? This isn't about judging yourself. It's about seeing clearly where your attention actually goes, because once you see it, you can begin to redirect it. Try this for the rest of today. Notice what drains you and what nourishes you. Not in some abstract, spiritual sense, but concretely. Which thoughts, when you give attention to them, leave you feeling heavier? Which ones, when you dwell in them, make your chest tighten or your mind race? And which thoughts, which moments, which types of attention leave you feeling more settled? Where does your mind naturally find rest? What activities absorb you in a way that feels nourishing rather than draining? Make a mental note, or if it helps, write it down. Not to create rules or judgments, but simply to see the pattern. You might notice that worrying about whether people like you always leaves you feeling worse, never better. That replaying past mistakes never actually resolves anything, just circles endlessly. That comparing yourself to others creates suffering every single time. You might also notice that being fully present with simple things, washing dishes, feeling warm water, hearing birds, creates a kind of peace that all your striving never does. That genuine connection, even briefly, nourishes more than hours of surface interaction. Awareness itself begins to shift things. You don't have to force change or fight with your mind. Just seeing clearly where your attention goes creates space for it to go somewhere else. Like Ryokan with the moon, you already have something abundant to give your attention to. This moment is here. This breath is happening. Life is occurring right now, whether you're paying attention to it or lost in worry about some other time. The thief can take your possessions. Circumstances can take your comfort. Time can take your youth. But no one can take this moment unless you give it away yourself by refusing to be here for it. Where your attention goes, your life flows. Not someday, not eventually, but right now, in this exact moment. Choose wisely. When people talk about boundaries, there's often a hardness to it. A sense of walls going up, doors closing, hearts shutting down to protect themselves. I need boundaries starts to sound like I need armor. Buddhism teaches something more subtle than just building walls. It teaches discernment, the ability to see clearly who nourishes your growth and who undermines it, who calls forth your better nature and who triggers your worst patterns. This gets misunderstood constantly. People think discernment means deciding who's good enough for you, who meets your standards, who deserves your precious time. That's not discernment. That's ego wearing a spiritual mask. Real discernment is asking, who do I become when I'm with this person? Do I become more patient or more reactive? More honest or more performative? More at peace or more anxious? These questions aren't about the other person's worth. They're about the quality of interaction that arises between you and whether that interaction serves the path you're trying to walk. The Buddha said something that surprises most people when they first hear it. He said that admirable friendship, wise, supportive companionship with others on the path, is the whole of the holy life. Not part of it, not a helpful addition, the whole thing. When one of his monks suggested that spiritual friendship was maybe half of the holy life, the Buddha corrected him firmly. No, he said, it's the entirety of it. Because who you walk with determines where you end up. This isn't mystical. It's observable. Spend time with people who complain constantly, and you'll find yourself complaining more. Spend time with people who practice kindness, and kindness becomes more natural to you. You become like the people you spend time with. Not because you're weak or easily influenced, but because that's how human minds work. We're shaped by what we're repeatedly exposed to, by the patterns that get reinforced in our daily interactions. So the Buddha taught, choose your companions with great care. Not because some people are worthy and others aren't, but because your companionship is one of the most powerful forces shaping who you become. Some relationships call forth your compassion, your patience, your wisdom. Even when they're difficult, even when there's conflict, something in the connection supports your growth. Other relationships, no matter how much you care about the person, consistently trigger your worst patterns. The question isn't who's better or worse. It's what serves the life you're trying to live. There's a story about this that most people know but often misunderstand. It's about a man named Angulimala, a serial killer who had murdered 99 people and wore a necklace of their fingers as trophies. The story focuses on the dramatic moment when Angulimala chased the Buddha through the forest, trying to make him his 100th victim. The Buddha walked calmly while Angulimala ran with all his strength but somehow couldn't catch him. Finally, Exhausted and confused, Angulimala shouted, "Stop, monk!" The Buddha turned and said, "I have stopped, Angulimala. When will you?" Those words broke something open in Angulimala. He realized the Buddha wasn't talking about physical movement. The Buddha had stopped running from himself, stopped running from truth, stopped the violence that comes from a mind at war with reality. Angulimala was still running, still trying to outpace his own suffering through violence. That moment transformed him. He became a monk, dedicated himself to practice, and eventually became enlightened. But here's what the story often leaves out. The Buddha didn't immediately make Angulimala his constant companion. After Angulimala's transformation, he lived at the monastery and faced the consequences of his actions. Villagers who had lost loved ones threw rocks at him when he walked for alms. The Buddha didn't protect him from that reality or insist everyone immediately accept him. The Buddha held two truths at once. Angulimala could transform, and Angulimala's past actions had created real harm that rippled through the community. Compassion didn't mean pretending the harm hadn't happened. This is the nuance most people miss when they think about compassion and boundaries. You can recognize someone's potential for change without giving them unlimited access to your life while they're still in their patterns. You can wish someone well without making yourself available for the harm they're not yet ready to stop causing. Some people are for loving from a distance, not because they're bad or unworthy, but because proximity to them consistently brings out patterns in you that you're trying to transform. Or because their current patterns create harm you're no longer willing to absorb. You can want good things for someone without being the person who provides those things. You can care about someone's well-being without being responsible for their healing. You can recognize that someone is struggling without making yourself available to be hurt by that struggle. This brings up guilt for a lot of people. The thought arrives, but shouldn't I be more compassionate? Shouldn't I be able to handle this? If that guilt is here for you right now, notice it. It's just another feeling arising, another thought pattern the mind has learned. Often that guilt was trained into you early, the belief that real love means endless availability, that boundaries mean you don't care enough. But the Buddha never taught that compassion means destroying yourself to help others. He taught the middle way, neither abandoning people nor abandoning yourself. You can hold compassion for someone's suffering and still recognize that your presence in their life, in this moment, isn't serving either of you. Sometimes the most honest thing you can offer someone is distance. The Buddha gave practical guidance. Associate with people who have integrity, who speak truthfully, who encourage your growth, rather than your destruction. He specifically warned against spending time with fools, not because they're worthless, but because foolishness is contagious. Spend enough time with people who make poor choices, and you'll start making poor choices. Not because you're weak, but because that's how conditioning works. This teaching isn't about superiority or judgment. It's about honesty regarding how influence actually operates. So what does this look like practically? It means you might love your family member deeply and also recognize that every extended visit leaves you depleted for weeks. It means you might care about your old friend, but notice that every conversation circles back to complaint and blame, and that pattern is strengthening those tendencies in you. It means you can send someone loving kindness in your meditation practice, while also choosing not to answer their calls. You can genuinely hope for their healing, while recognizing you're not capable of being part of that process without harm to yourself. This isn't about cutting people off cruelly or burning bridges with pronouncements. Sometimes it's just quiet choices about where you direct your time and energy. Less availability, slower responses, shorter visits. The Buddha walked toward Angulimala when Angulimala was ready to stop. The Buddha's steadiness in that moment helped Angulimala see what stopping actually looked like. But the Buddha didn't chase Angulimala through the years he was killing, trying to convince him to change. You're not the Buddha, and you don't have to be. You're just a person trying to walk a path of less harm, more awareness, more peace. And part of that path is recognizing who supports that walking and who consistently makes it harder. The guilt you feel about creating distance, notice how it wants to override your direct experience of what actually happens in the relationship. The guilt says, you should be able to handle this. But your direct experience says, I become someone I don't want to be when I'm with this person. Trust your experience over your guilt. Spiritual friendship, the kind the Buddha said was the whole of the holy life, is mutual. It's relationships where both people support each other's growth, where the interaction brings out patience rather than reactivity, honesty rather than performance. That doesn't mean perfect relationships, or people who never trigger you. It means relationships where there's enough trust and goodwill that conflicts can be worked through, where difficulties become opportunities for deeper understanding. You can't force that mutuality into existence. What you can do is notice clearly who actually supports your path and choose to walk more closely with those people. This is one of the hardest teachings to practice because it goes against so much of what we've been taught about loyalty, family, unconditional love. If it brings up resistance, that's normal. If it brings up sadness about relationships you've had to distance yourself from, that's normal too. The sadness doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're human, and letting go of connection, even connection that harms, is legitimately difficult. But notice, the sadness passes. The guilt eventually quiets. And what remains is more space for the relationships that actually nourish both people. More energy for the path you're walking. More clarity about who you're becoming. The Buddha chose his close companions carefully. Not everyone who wanted to be near him had that access. Not because he was exclusive or superior, but because he understood that who you walk with intimately shapes where you end up. You're allowed to understand that too. Most people hear the word precepts and think of rules carved in stone, commandments handed down, restrictions on freedom. The mind immediately starts calculating what you'll have to give up, what pleasures will be forbidden, how much harder life will become. But what if precepts aren't about control at all? What if they're simply descriptions of what a peaceful life actually looks like? Observations about what protects your clarity and what clouds it. The Buddha didn't create the precepts to restrict you. He observed how suffering works, what actions create more of it, and what actions reduce it, then offered these observations as trainings, practices you can take up voluntarily because you've seen for yourself that they lead to less harm. Think of them less like rules and more like maintaining a garden. You don't pull weeds because someone commanded you to. You pull them because you've noticed that when you don't, they choke out everything you're trying to grow. The precepts work the same way. They're not about earning points for good behavior or avoiding punishment for bad. They're about noticing what actually protects your peace and what consistently destroys it. When the Buddha taught the 5 precepts, he was teaching a kind of self-care that most people miss entirely. Not self-care in the sense of bubble baths and face masks, but self-care in the sense of not actively harming the vessel you're trying to live in. The first precept is about not killing, not harming living beings. On the surface, this seems obvious. Don't murder people. Don't torture animals. But look deeper and you see it includes not harming yourself. Every time you stay in a toxic relationship that's slowly destroying you, you're violating this precept. Every time you push yourself past the point of exhaustion because you believe rest is laziness, you're harming a living being, yourself. Every time you speak to yourself with cruelty you'd never use toward anyone else, you're engaged in harm. The precept isn't just, don't hurt others. It's, recognize that harm creates suffering and choose not to create suffering when you can avoid it. That includes the suffering you create for yourself through neglect, overwork, or staying in situations that damage you. The second precept is about not taking what isn't given. Again, obvious on the surface, don't steal. But extend it, and you see it also means not giving away what isn't yours to give. Your time isn't unlimited, so giving it all away to people who don't value it is a form of theft from your own life. Your energy isn't endless, so pouring it into things that deplete you is stealing from your own capacity to be present for what actually matters. This precept teaches discernment about exchange. Not everything given to you needs to be accepted, and not everything asked of you needs to be provided. Some requests are actually demands, some gifts are actually obligations, and recognizing the difference protects you from depletion. The third precept addresses sexual misconduct, which traditionally means not using sexuality in ways that cause harm. No adultery, no exploitation, no using intimacy as manipulation. But broaden it slightly, and you see it's about not betraying yourself for connection. How many times have you compromised your own boundaries, ignored your own discomfort, or silenced your own needs because you were afraid of losing intimacy? This precept asks, are you honoring yourself in how you connect with others? Or are you abandoning yourself, pretending to want what you don't want, agreeing to what doesn't feel right, all in the hope that if you're accommodating enough, someone will finally choose you? The fourth precept is about truthful speech, not lying, not using words to deceive or manipulate. Straightforward enough until you realize how often you lie to yourself. I'm fine when you're falling apart. It doesn't bother me when it's eating you alive. I can handle it when you're already drowning. These aren't just white lies to protect others' comfort. They're forms of self-deception that prevent you from seeing your own reality clearly. Truthful speech includes being honest with yourself about what you're actually feeling, what you're actually capable of, what's actually happening in your life. Without that honesty, you can't make wise choices because you're operating on false information. The fifth precept traditionally warns against intoxicants that cloud the mind. In modern interpretation, this extends to anything you use to numb yourself. Substances, yes, but also endless scrolling, compulsive working, chronic busyness, anything that keeps you from being present with your actual experience. Sometimes you need to check out. That's human. But when checking out becomes your default strategy for dealing with discomfort, when you can't sit with yourself for 5 minutes without reaching for a distraction, the precept is being broken. A clear mind doesn't mean a happy mind or a calm mind necessarily. It means a mind that can see what's actually happening, that isn't constantly running from itself, that hasn't numbed itself into oblivion to avoid feeling difficult things. Thich Nhat Hanh taught the precepts as trainings in mindfulness, not moral absolutes. Each one is an invitation to notice what creates suffering and what creates peace. Then, to align your actions with what you've noticed. The precepts aren't about perfection. You'll break them. Everyone does. The practice isn't never breaking them, but noticing when you do, understanding what led to that, and gently returning to the intention behind them. There's an old story that illustrates this perfectly. It comes from China, from when Buddhism was first arriving there and encountering different ways of thinking about spiritual practice. Emperor Wu was a devoted Buddhist, or thought he was. He had built temples, funded monasteries, copied sacred texts, supported thousands of monks. He had done all the right things, accumulated all the right merit. When Bodhidharma, a renowned Buddhist master, arrived in China, the emperor summoned him immediately. This was his chance to confirm what he already believed about himself, that his great deeds had earned him great spiritual merit. I have built temples and supported the Sangha extensively, Emperor Wu said. What merit have I accumulated from all these virtuous acts? Bodhidharma looked at him directly and said, No merit. The emperor was shocked. What do you mean, no merit? I've done all these things for the Dharma. These are worldly achievements, Bodhidharma replied calmly. They follow you like a shadow, but they are not merit. True merit comes from pure wisdom and a complete, perfect emptiness. It cannot be sought through worldly actions. Then what is the highest meaning of noble truth? The emperor demanded, frustrated now. Empty, without nobility, Bodhidharma answered. Who stands before me answering my questions? The emperor asked, trying to regain his footing. I don't know, Bodhidharma said. The emperor had no idea what to do with this. Bodhidharma left shortly after, crossing the river and sitting in meditation facing a wall for 9 years. This story is often told to show the difference between Bodhidharma's direct approach and the emperor's conceptual understanding. But it's also about what the precepts actually mean. The emperor thought following the precepts, doing good deeds, supporting the Sangha was about accumulating something, merit, virtue, spiritual points that would add up to enlightenment eventually. Bodhidharma was pointing to something else entirely. Living the precepts isn't about earning anything. It's not about becoming worthy or building up a spiritual bank account. It's simply living in alignment with what creates less suffering. You don't follow the precepts to become a good Buddhist. You follow them because you've noticed that harming others creates suffering in you, that lying requires you to maintain false stories that exhaust you, that staying in toxic patterns makes everything harder. The precepts are self-care in the deepest sense. They protect your clarity, your peace, your ability to see clearly and act wisely. Not because following them makes you special, but because they describe what a life of less harm actually looks like. So which precept, if you lived it fully, would most change your life? Maybe it's the first one, truly not harming yourself anymore, not staying in situations that damage you, not speaking to yourself with cruelty, not ignoring your body's needs until it breaks down. Maybe it's the second, not giving away your time and energy to things that don't give anything back, not depleting yourself to fill others' endless demands. Maybe it's the fourth, being honest with yourself about what you're feeling, what you need, what's actually happening, instead of what you wish were happening. You don't have to become perfect at all of them. You don't have to never break them. That's not the point, and never was. The point is noticing. Noticing when you're harming yourself and asking, why? Noticing when you're lying to yourself and getting curious about what truth you're avoiding. Noticing when you're numbing yourself and wondering what you're trying not to feel. The precepts aren't commandments from outside. They're observations from people who looked carefully at what creates suffering and what creates peace, then wrote down what they saw. You can verify them yourself. Do harmful actions create peace in you? Does dishonesty make your life simpler or more complicated? Does staying numb protect you or prevent you from living? The answers are already in your experience. The precepts just name what you've probably already noticed but haven't quite trusted yourself to act on. They're not restrictions. They're descriptions of freedom, the freedom that comes from not being constantly at war with yourself, not creating unnecessary suffering, not abandoning yourself to please others or avoid discomfort. Live them imperfectly. Break them and return to them. Let them be trainings, not achievements. And notice what shifts when you do. When most people hear about Buddhist non-attachment, they imagine someone who has stopped caring. Someone who's become cold, distant, emotionally unavailable. They picture a monk sitting alone on a mountain, unmoved by the world's suffering, untouched by joy or grief, having successfully amputated all feeling in the name of enlightenment. This misunderstanding has done enormous damage. It's made Buddhism seem like a path of emotional death, a slow freezing of the heart until you feel nothing at all. But that's not what non-attachment means. Not even close. Buddhism teaches the opposite: to care deeply, feel fully, love completely, and to do all of that without clinging, without needing things to be different than they are, without grasping so tightly that you strangle what you're trying to hold. The difference between attachment and love is subtle, but changes everything. Attachment says, I need you to be happy. I need this situation to work out. I need things to go the way I planned, or I'll fall apart. Attachment is love, mixed with fear, need, the belief that your well-being depends entirely on things staying a certain way. Love without attachment says, I care about you deeply. I want good things for you. And if circumstances change, if you leave, if this ends, I'll grieve, but I won't be destroyed. It's the difference between holding water in your cupped hands and trying to grip it in your fist. When you cup your hands gently, the water stays. When you grip tightly, trying to possess it, to make sure it can't escape, it runs through your fingers and you lose it. Most people spend their lives gripping relationships, trying to control how others feel about them, gripping outcomes, needing things to happen exactly as planned, gripping identities, clinging to ideas about who they are, and defending those ideas against any threat. And the gripping itself creates the suffering they're trying to avoid. There's a Zen story that captures this perfectly, though it's often misunderstood. It's about a monk named Ikkyu, who lived in 15th century Japan and was known for his unconventional wisdom. Ikkyu's mother lived far away in a different province. They rarely saw each other, separated by distance and the requirements of monastic life. But she thought of him constantly, held him in her heart, worried about him the way mothers do. One day she sent him a letter. In it, she wrote simply, I think of you always. It was tender, honest, the kind of thing any mother might write to a son she misses. An expression of love, of connection, maintained across distance. Ikkyu's response shocked everyone who heard about it. He wrote back, I never think of you. On the surface, this seems cruel, heartless, the kind of thing an enlightened master might say if enlightenment meant having your heart surgically removed. But Ikkyu wasn't being cruel. He was pointing to something profound about the nature of separation and connection. When his mother said, "I think of you always," she was describing a particular kind of thinking, the thinking that reinforces separation. I am here, you are there, and I bridge that distance by holding you in my thoughts. It's a loving gesture, but it's built on the belief in fundamental separateness. When Ikkyu said, "I never think of you," he was pointing to a deeper truth. In the awareness that he lived in, there was no separation, requiring thoughts to bridge the gap. His mother wasn't a separate object he occasionally thought about. She was present in the same seamless awareness that everything else was present in, not separate from his own being. This doesn't mean he didn't love her. It means his love wasn't dependent on clinging to mental images of her, on constantly thinking about her to maintain the connection. The connection was always there, prior to thought, not created by thinking, but obscured when thinking tried to capture it. Think of it this way: you don't have to constantly think about your hand to know it's there. It's part of you, connected, present. You only think about it when something calls your attention to it. The rest of the time, it's just there, integrated into your being, without requiring constant mental confirmation. Ikkyu was suggesting his mother was like that, not separate in a way that required constant thinking about to maintain connection, but present in a way that preceded and transcended thought. Most people can't live at that level of realization, and that's fine. But the teaching still applies to everyday experience. There's a difference between loving someone and clinging to them, between caring about outcomes and needing to control them. Attachment says, "I need you to stay exactly as you are, need this relationship to last forever, need you to never change or leave or die because I can't survive without you." Love says, "I cherish you now, in this moment, exactly as you are. I know everything changes, know this will end someday, and still, I give my full heart to it while it's here." You can see this in how people relate to almost anything. Take a job you love. Attachment says, "I need this job to last forever. If I lose it, my identity collapses. I'll do anything to keep it, even if the cost becomes too high." Non-attachment says, "I'm grateful for this work while I have it. I'll do it fully, care about it deeply. And when circumstances change, as they will, I'll grieve the loss and move forward." The same applies to relationships, to health, to any circumstance in your life. You can care without clinging. You can be fully present without needing things to be permanent. You can love knowing that loss is inevitable and let that knowledge make you more tender rather than more defended. This is what the Buddha meant when he taught about clinging as the root of suffering. He wasn't saying, stop loving people. He was saying, notice what happens when you try to make impermanent things permanent, when you try to possess what can't be possessed, when you cling to what's already flowing away. The clinging creates a constant tension. You're trying to hold still what's always moving, trying to grip what keeps slipping through your fingers. That tension is exhausting, and it prevents you from actually enjoying what's here while it's here because you're too busy trying to make sure it never leaves. Think about holding a bird. If you grip it tightly, trying to make sure it can't fly away, you'll hurt it. Maybe even kill it. But if you hold it gently, let it rest in your open palm, it might stay for a while. And when it flies away, as it eventually will, your hand remains unharmed and open for whatever comes next. Most people go through life with clenched fists, white knuckles, arms aching from the effort of holding on. They think this is what love requires, what commitment means, what caring looks like. But watch what happens when you soften your grip just slightly. Not abandoning what you care about, not stopping your caring, just holding it a little less tightly. Allowing for the possibility that things might change, that people might leave, that circumstances might shift, and trusting that you'll be okay, even if they do. This isn't resignation or giving up. It's making space for reality to be what it is, instead of constantly fighting with it to be what you wish it were. The Buddha told a story about this once, about a raft. He said the Dharma, the teachings, the practice, is like a raft you use to cross a river. Once you reach the other shore, you don't carry the raft on your back for the rest of your life. You leave it behind because it served its purpose. Even teachings, even practices, even the path itself, these are meant to be used, not clung to. They help you cross from confusion to clarity, from suffering to peace. But once you've crossed, holding on to them becomes another form of burden. This applies to everything. Relationships serve their purpose for a time, then sometimes they need to change or end. Jobs give you what you need for a season, then new circumstances call you elsewhere. Even identities, who you think you are, these need to shift as you grow, and clinging to old versions of yourself prevents that growth. So notice today, what are you gripping? Where in your life are your fists clenched, your jaw tight, your whole being contracted around the fear of losing something? And what would happen if you softened that grip just a little? Not letting go completely, not walking away from what matters, just holding it a bit more gently, allowing it to be what it is instead of what you need it to be. You might find that when you stop gripping so tightly, things don't fall apart the way you feared. In fact, they might become more present, more vivid, more real, because you're finally allowing them to exist as they are, instead of as your fear-constricted version of them. Ikkyu's mother thought of him always, and in that constant thinking, there was a subtle suffering, the suffering of separation, of distance, of longing for what wasn't present. Ikkyu never thought of her, and in that not thinking, there was no separation to suffer from. She was already present in his awareness in a way that didn't require constant mental grasping. You don't have to reach Ikkyu's level of realization, but you can notice when your love has become mixed with grasping, when your caring has turned into clinging, when you're holding so tightly that your arms ache and whatever you're holding is gasping for air. And in those moments, you can choose to soften, to open your hands just slightly, to trust that love doesn't require possession, that connection doesn't require control, that caring can coexist with letting go. This is the art of non-clinging, staying present, caring deeply, and allowing everything to be exactly as impermanent as it actually is. So many people carry a story about themselves that goes something like this: I'm damaged. Something broke in me along the way, and now I'm fundamentally flawed. Too much for some people, not enough for others, never quite right. This story runs deep. It colors how you see yourself, how you move through the world, what you believe you deserve. It whispers that other people are whole and you're the broken one, that everyone else got the manual for being human and yours was lost in the mail. And here's what makes it so painful. You believe it. Not as a thought you occasionally have, but as the truth of who you are. The brokenness feels like fact, not story, like something diagnosed rather than something narrated. Maybe it started with something real: trauma, loss, rejection, moments when you genuinely were hurt and the hurt left marks. Pain happened, no question about that. But somewhere along the way, the experience of pain transformed into an identity: I am broken. And once that identity forms, everything becomes evidence for it. Someone treats you poorly? Must be because you're damaged, and they could sense it. A relationship ends? Obviously, because there's something fundamentally wrong with you. You struggle with something others seem to handle easily? More proof that you're irreparably flawed. The story feeds itself, grows stronger, becomes the lens through which you interpret every experience. And the weight of carrying it exhausts you. You walk through life feeling like you're hiding a terrible secret from everyone you meet, the secret of your brokenness, the flaw you're sure they'll eventually discover. If any of this resonates, first, you're not alone. This story is almost universal. And second, the Buddha had something important to say about it. There's a story from the earliest Buddhist texts about a woman named Kisa Gautami. She lived in a small village and was married young, as was common. For a long time she couldn't have children, and in that culture, at that time, this brought her shame and diminished her standing. Finally, she gave birth to a son. Everything changed. She was respected now, valued, her place in the community secured. She poured all her love into this child, all her hope for the future, all her sense of worth. When the boy was old enough to walk and play, he became sick suddenly. In a matter of days, he died. Kisa Gautami couldn't accept it. She held her son's body, convinced he wasn't really dead, just sleeping, just sick, needing the right medicine. She walked through the village carrying him, going door to door, begging for medicine that could bring him back. People told her gently, then firmly, "Your son is dead. There is no medicine. You need to let him go." But she couldn't hear them. Her mind had broken in a different way, broken open into a reality it couldn't accept, so it simply refused to accept it. Someone finally suggested she go see the Buddha, who was teaching nearby. They said, if anyone has medicine for death, it would be him. She went, carrying her son, and stood before the Buddha. "Please," she said, "give me the medicine that will bring my son back to life." The Buddha looked at her with immense compassion. He didn't say what everyone else had said. He didn't tell her the child was dead or that she needed to accept it. Instead, he said, "I can help you, but first, I need you to bring me a mustard seed." She felt hope surge through her. A mustard seed, such a simple thing, easy to find. But, the Buddha continued, it must come from a house that has never known death, where no one has ever lost a parent, a child, a loved one. Bring me this seed, and I will give you what you need. Kisa Gautami set out immediately, still carrying her son. She went to the first house and knocked. "Do you have a mustard seed?" she asked. "Of course," they said, and offered her some. "Has anyone in this house died?" she asked. The family grew quiet. "My father," someone said, 3 years ago. She thanked them and moved to the next house. And the next, and the next. Every house had mustard seeds. Every house had also known death. A grandmother, a brother, a daughter, a husband, every single home had lost someone. Kisa Gotami walked all night, through the entire village and into neighboring ones. House after house shared their stories, recent losses that still felt raw, old losses that had softened but never disappeared. As dawn approached, she found herself sitting at the edge of the village, her son's body finally set down beside her. And in that moment, something shifted. She realized the Buddha hadn't been sending her to find a mustard seed. He'd been sending her to find understanding. Her loss wasn't unique. Her pain wasn't proof of something wrong with her. Death, loss, grief, these touch everyone. Not one house was untouched. Her son was dead, and that was real and devastating and true. But she wasn't broken for grieving him. She wasn't damaged for not being able to accept his death immediately. She was human, experiencing what humans experience when they lose what they love. She returned to the Buddha and asked to become a student. She learned to work with her grief, not by denying it or transcending it, but by understanding it as part of the human experience. Eventually, she became enlightened, not by escaping her wound, but by understanding it so deeply that it no longer defined her. This story is often told to teach about impermanence and universal suffering. But it also teaches something crucial about how we relate to our own pain. Kisa Gotami's pain was real. Her son died. That's the first arrow, unavoidable pain that comes from being alive and caring about things in a world where everything changes. But there was a second arrow she was shooting at herself. I must be cursed. This happened because something is wrong with me. I'm being punished. I'm uniquely damaged. The Buddha taught that the first arrow, pain itself, is inevitable. You're human, so you'll experience loss, disappointment, physical pain, death of loved ones. These are part of life, not punishments or signs of your brokenness. The second arrow is the story you tell about the first arrow. The narrative that says, this pain means something about me. It proves I'm broken, damaged, fundamentally flawed. It's happening because I deserve it, or because there's something wrong with me. That second arrow, the story, often hurts more than the original pain. It takes a moment of hurt and turns it into a permanent statement about your worth, your nature, your fundamental adequacy as a human being. Someone rejects you. That's painful. First arrow. But then your mind adds, they rejected me because I'm unlovable. Everyone always leaves because I'm too broken to keep. This proves what I've always known about myself. Second arrow. You make a mistake. Uncomfortable. First arrow. But then, I always mess things up. I'm incompetent, worthless, can't do anything right. Why am I even trying? Second arrow. The first arrow is life happening. The second arrow is the story that turns life happening into evidence of your brokenness. And here's where it gets interesting. When you start looking for this pattern, you realize how often you're shooting second arrows. How much of your suffering comes not from what's actually happening, but from what you're telling yourself about what's happening. The Buddha's teaching wasn't, "You're not broken." That would still reinforce the idea that there's a fixed you that could be broken or not broken. His teaching was more radical. What if there's no solid, permanent self to be broken in the first place? What you call yourself is a changing process, not a fixed thing. Thoughts arising and passing, feelings coming and going, sensations shifting moment by moment. Where in all that change is the permanent, broken thing you're defending against? This isn't meant to minimize your pain or dismiss your experiences. It's pointing to something that could free you from identifying with pain as who you are. Pain happens. Yes. Difficulty arises. Absolutely. But I Am Broken is a story about pain, not pain itself. And stories can be seen through. Try this, gently, when pain comes. Instead of immediately layering story on top of it, instead of jumping to, "This means I'm broken," or "This proves I'm damaged," can you just be with the raw sensation of it for a moment? Not, "I am hurt." Not, "I am broken." Just, "This is what pain feels like." There's a difference. "I am hurt" makes the hurt into your identity. "This is what pain feels like" makes it an experience you're having, not who you are. "I am broken" becomes a permanent state, something wrong with your fundamental nature. "This is what grief feels like," or "This is what disappointment feels like." These are temporary experiences moving through, not definitions of your being. This is advanced practice, so be patient with yourself. The habit of turning pain into identity is deep, often decades old. You won't undo it in a day or a week. But you can start to notice it. Notice when you move from "this hurts" to "I am broken." Notice when you move from "this is difficult" to "there's something wrong with me." Just notice, without judgment, the way the mind adds that second layer. And sometimes in the space between the first arrow and the second, you might find you don't have to shoot the second one at all. You can just be with what's actually here: pain, difficulty, loss, without making it mean you're fundamentally damaged. The practice isn't pretending pain doesn't hurt, or trying to feel something other than what you feel. It's learning to distinguish between the pain itself and the story that says the pain proves something terrible about who you are. Kisa Gautami's grief didn't make her broken. It made her human. And when she understood that her pain was part of the universal human experience, rather than evidence of her personal damage, something in her relaxed, even while the grief remained. You might find the same. Not that the pain goes away, but that the story about what the pain means can be questioned, softened, seen as story rather than truth. And in that seeing, even while difficulty remains, there's a kind of freedom. We've covered a lot. If your mind is tired, that's okay. Some of what we're exploring can't be understood all at once. It seeps in slowly, works on you in ways that aren't immediately obvious. You might not remember every story or teaching, and that's fine. What matters is if something landed, if something resonated, if anything felt true in your direct experience. If you're still here after almost 90 minutes, you're doing something brave. Not everyone can sit with this kind of material, with teachings that ask you to question stories you've believed for years. Take a breath. Let your body settle into whatever it's resting on. Release your shoulders. Unclench your jaw. If it's tight, let your hands rest open rather than gripped. We're moving into something important now. What to do with all the noise in the mind, the constant chatter that makes peace feel impossible. But first, just this breath. Just this moment of being here, having listened, having stayed present, even when it was difficult. You've probably had moments when an emotion grabs you so completely that you become it. Anger takes over, and suddenly you're saying things you'll regret, doing things that don't align with who you want to be. Anxiety floods in, and your whole body contracts. your mind spinning with worst-case scenarios that feel absolutely real. When emotions run the show, life becomes exhausting. You're constantly at the mercy of whatever feeling arises, riding wave after wave with no solid ground beneath you. One moment you're up, the next you're crashing down, and you have no idea which version of yourself will show up from hour to hour. You try to plan your day, but anxiety about something that might happen derails everything. You try to have a calm conversation, but irritation takes over, and suddenly you're in an argument you never intended. You want to be present with the people you love, but sadness pulls you into yourself, making connection impossible. So naturally, you try to control it. You push down the anger, stuff away the sadness, tell yourself you shouldn't feel what you're feeling. But that doesn't work either. Suppressed emotions don't disappear. They just go underground, seeping out in unexpected ways, snapping at people you love, tension that lives in your body, numbness that makes everything feel flat. You're caught between two impossible options: be swept away by every feeling, or spend enormous energy trying to suppress what's already arising. Neither one leads to peace. The Buddha taught something different, a middle way, with emotions that's neither suppression nor drowning. It's a practice of being with feelings without becoming them, of letting them move through without being destroyed by them. This practice has a name in Buddhist teaching: equanimity. But that word often gets misunderstood as detachment or not caring. Real equanimity isn't coldness. It's a deep steadiness that can hold all feelings without being capsized by any of them. There's a teaching from the earliest Buddhist texts that captures this beautifully. The Buddha was near the ocean once, teaching a group of monks about the nature of suffering and how to work with it. A storm was building on the horizon. They could see it approaching, dark clouds, wind whipping the water into peaks and valleys, rain beginning to fall in heavy sheets. The surface of the ocean became violent, chaotic, waves crashing against each other with tremendous force. The Buddha pointed to the churning water and asked the monks, "What do you see?" "Turbulence," one said. "Chaos," said another. "Violence," offered a third. The Buddha nodded. Yes, at the surface this is true. The storm has transformed the ocean into something wild and dangerous. A small boat caught in this would be destroyed. They all agreed, watching the waves grow larger, more unpredictable. Then the Buddha said something unexpected. But dive beneath the surface, down past where the wind reaches, And what do you find? The monks considered this. Some had been fishermen before becoming monks, had dived deep into the ocean, searching for pearls or coral. They knew what he was pointing to. Stillness, one finally said. Yes, the Buddha replied. 10 feet below the surface, the water is already calmer. 20 feet down, you can barely feel the storm. 30 feet, 40 feet, the deeper you go, the more still the water becomes. At the ocean floor, there is no storm at all. Just depth, just silence, just the unchanging quality of water being water. He let this image settle in their minds before continuing. Your mind is the same, he said. At the surface, emotions arise like waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes violent. Anger, fear, joy, grief, all of them moving across the surface of your awareness, like weather moving across the ocean. If you identify completely with the surface, you are tossed around endlessly. Every wave feels like it will drown you. Every storm feels like the end of the world. The monks nodded, recognizing their own experience in his words. But, the Buddha continued, if you learn to rest in the depth, if you discover the part of you that's like the ocean floor, unchanging beneath all the surface turbulence, then the storms can rage and you remain steady. Not because you've stopped the storm, not because you've suppressed the waves, but because you've found where you actually are beneath all of it. One of the monks asked, "But Master, how do we find this depth? The storm is so loud, so overwhelming. How do we dive below it when it's pulling us in every direction?" The Buddha smiled. You don't fight the storm to find the depth. You simply notice, even now, even in the middle of the strongest emotion, there is something in you that's aware of the emotion. That awareness is the depth. It's always there, always steady, never disturbed by what it's aware of. He pointed back to the ocean. The water at the surface and the water at the depth, they're the same water. The storm doesn't make them different substances. The surface is just temporary movement in something much vaster and deeper. Your emotions are the same. They're temporary movements on the surface of your awareness. They're not separate from you, but they're also not all of you. You are the depth that holds them. This teaching points to something you can verify in your own experience. When anger arises, notice there's the anger itself, hot, tight, demanding, and there's the awareness that knows anger is present. Those are two different things. The anger is the wave. The awareness is the depth. Equanimity isn't about stopping the waves or pretending they're not there. It's about learning to rest in the depth even while the waves move across the surface. It's discovering that you're not the storm. You're the vast space the storm moves through. This doesn't mean emotions stop mattering or that you become some sort of robot who feels nothing. The waves still come, still have their power, still move you to action when appropriate. But they don't own you anymore. They don't define you. They don't sweep you so completely off center that you lose yourself in them. Think about how emotions actually work. They arise, often without your permission or control. They build to a peak. They pass. This is true for every single emotion, even the ones that feel permanent when you're in them. Anger rises, burns hot, then fades. Anxiety spikes, grips you, then releases. Even grief, which can last longer than other emotions, comes in waves, intense for a while, then softer, then intense again. Nothing stays at peak intensity forever, because feelings are processes, not permanent states. The Buddha taught this as a fundamental principle. Everything that arises passes away. Not as philosophy, but as something you can observe directly. Watch any emotion closely, and you'll see it's not solid or unchanging. It pulses, shifts, transforms from moment to moment. Even the hardest feeling has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The problem is that when you're identified with the feeling, when you believe, "I am angry," rather than "anger is present," you can't see it clearly. You're inside it, and from inside, it feels permanent, feels like the truth of who you are. But if you can find even a small bit of space, if you can rest in the depth for just a moment, you start to see the feeling as weather moving through rather than reality itself. This is the practice. Next time a strong emotion arises, try something different. Instead of immediately acting on it or trying to push it away, pause. Take one breath and say internally, "This is anger," or "This is fear," or whatever the feeling is. Not "I am angry," not "I am afraid." Just, "This is anger. Anger feels like this." It's a subtle shift, but it creates space. "I am angry" collapses you into the emotion. You become it completely. "This is anger" acknowledges the emotion while maintaining some separation between the awareness that notices and the emotion being noticed. You're not denying the anger or pretending it's not strong. You're just being accurate about what's happening. Anger is arising in your experience right now. You're the space it's arising in, not the anger itself. Try it with physical sensations too. My chest is tight. My jaw is clenched. There's heat in my face. Describing what's happening, instead of collapsing into it, gives your nervous system something to work with, besides pure reaction. The more you practice this, the more you'll notice something remarkable. You can feel intensely and be steady at the same time. The emotion can rage at the surface, while the depth remains undisturbed. Both are true simultaneously. You don't have to choose between feeling fully and staying centered. You're not the storm. You're not the waves crashing on the surface. You're the ocean itself, vast enough to hold all weather, deep enough that no storm reaches all the way through you. This doesn't happen instantly. Your mind has decades of practice being the storm, identifying completely with every emotion that arises. Learning to rest in the depth takes time, repetition, patience with yourself when you forget and get swept away again. But even knowing this is possible changes something. Even one moment of noticing anger is present instead of I am angry plants a seed. That seed can grow into the capacity to meet your own emotional life with steadiness instead of fear, with space instead of contraction. The storm at the surface is real. The depth beneath it is also real. Both exist simultaneously. You don't have to choose between feeling and stability. You can be both the movement and the stillness, the wave and the depth, fully feeling and fully free at the same time. Most people want change without discomfort. They want to grow, heal, become free, but they want it to happen easily, painlessly, while staying exactly where they are. Real change rarely works that way. Not because suffering is required for growth, but because transformation means doing something different than what you've been doing, and different almost always feels uncomfortable at first. You've been practicing certain patterns for years, maybe decades. Patterns of thought, reaction, behavior that have worn grooves in your mind, like water wearing grooves in stone. Those grooves are comfortable now, familiar. Walking a new path means stepping out of them, and that initial step feels awkward, uncertain, like you're doing it wrong even when you're doing it right. So most people take 1 or 2 steps, feel the discomfort, and retreat back to what's familiar. This doesn't feel natural, they think. maybe this isn't right for me. They mistake the discomfort of newness for evidence that change isn't working. But here's what the Buddha understood. There's a difference between pain that breaks you and pain that breaks you open. Pain that breaks you is unnecessary suffering, pushing yourself past healthy limits, forcing growth through violence, punishing yourself for being imperfect. Buddhism doesn't teach this. The Buddha explicitly rejected extreme asceticism, the practice of torturing the body to achieve spiritual advancement. Pain that breaks you open is different. It's the discomfort of stretching beyond old limits, of sitting with difficult feelings instead of running, of choosing the harder, right thing over the easier, wrong thing. This kind of discomfort doesn't destroy you. It reveals what's been hidden, clears what's been blocking you, opens space for something new to emerge. There's a story from Tibet that illustrates this perfectly. It's about a man named Milarepa, who would become one of the greatest yogis in Tibetan Buddhist history. But before that, he was just a desperate young man seeking redemption. In his youth, Milarepa had studied black magic and used it to kill people who had wronged his family. He murdered through sorcery, and when he realized what he'd done, the weight of it crushed him. He went searching for a teacher who could help him purify this karma, show him a path to liberation, despite what he'd done. He found Marpa, a master known for his wisdom and his unconventional teaching methods. Milarepa prostrated himself before Marpa and begged to be taught. Marpa looked at him for a long moment, then said, "If you want to learn from me, first you must build me a tower." Milarepa agreed immediately, grateful for the chance. Marpa took him to a hillside and described an elaborate stone tower, its dimensions, its shape, exactly how it should be built. Milarepa began working. He carried stones up the hillside, one by one. He mixed mortar, laid foundations, built walls. It took months of back-breaking labor, but finally, the tower stood complete, impressive, and solid. He went to Marpa with joy, ready to begin his real training. Marpa walked up the hillside, examined the tower carefully, then said, "This isn't right. Tear it down and build it again in a different location." Milarepa was stunned, but he obeyed. He tore down what he'd built, carried the stones to a new location, and began again. When the second tower was finished, Marpa came, looked at it, and said, "No, this shape is wrong. Take it down and build it differently." Again, Milarepa tore down his work and started over. This happened again, and again, and again. Each time, Milarepa would spend months building a tower, perfecting it, hoping this would be the one that satisfied his teacher. Each time, Marpa would find a reason to reject it and demand he start over. Milarepa's body broke down from the labor. His back developed sores from carrying stones. His hands bled. Other students of Marpa's received teachings, were guided in meditation, made visible progress. Milarepa just built towers and tore them down. He began to despair, to think Marpa was punishing him rather than teaching him, that perhaps his karma was too heavy to purify and he should give up. But something kept him going, not blind faith, but a deeper intuition that this impossible labor was doing something in him, even if he couldn't see it yet. After years of this, Marpa finally called him. "Enough," he said. The towers were never about architecture. They were about wearing away your pride, your impatience, your belief that spiritual development should come easily. Every stone you carried was carrying away some of the heaviness you brought to me. Now you're ready to receive teachings, because now you understand what practice actually requires. Milarepa went on to become enlightened in that lifetime, something considered extremely rare. Not because he was naturally gifted, but because he had learned what most people never learn. Transformation requires showing up again and again, even when you can't see the results, even when it seems pointless, even when every part of you wants to quit. The Buddha learned this same lesson through different means. Before his awakening, he tried extreme asceticism. He ate almost nothing, tortured his body, pushed himself to the edge of death, believing that suffering would break through to enlightenment. It didn't work. It just made him weak, unable to practice effectively, no closer to understanding. So he abandoned that path and tried the opposite: indulgence, ease, comfort. This also didn't lead to freedom. Comfort kept him stagnant, comfortable in his confusion. Finally, he found what he called the middle way, steady, patient effort that doesn't destroy you, but also doesn't let you hide in comfort. Not too tight, not too loose, like tuning the string of an instrument to the exact tension that makes beautiful music. Too tight, and the string breaks. That's pushing yourself into burnout, exhaustion, self-destruction in the name of growth. Too loose, and the string produces no sound. That's staying comfortable, avoiding anything difficult, never actually changing. The right tension allows music to emerge. The right effort allows transformation without destruction. This means something practical for your life. Real change comes from showing up consistently, not from dramatic gestures or perfect execution. It's the daily practice that transforms you, not the occasional breakthrough moment. Think about Milarepa carrying stones up a hillside. Each individual stone didn't create enlightenment, but the accumulation of thousands of stones, carried over years, wore away what needed to be worn away and built what needed to be built. Your practice is the same. One day of noticing your patterns doesn't free you from them, but years of noticing, day after day, gradually loosens their grip until one day you realize you're no longer caught the way you used to be. One moment of staying with discomfort instead of numbing doesn't heal all your wounds. But consistent practice of staying present with what's difficult builds your capacity until things that once overwhelmed you become manageable. So what's one thing you could do each day that your future self would thank you for? Not 10 things. Not a complete life overhaul. Just one thing, small enough that you can actually do it, significant enough that doing it matters. Maybe it's 5 minutes of sitting quietly before the day begins, just breathing, just being present with whatever arises. Maybe it's 1 moment each day of pausing before reacting, creating space between stimulus and response. Maybe it's noticing 1 time each day when you're about to abandon yourself to please someone else and choosing differently. It doesn't have to be big. In fact, it probably shouldn't be big, because big changes are hard to sustain, and when you can't maintain them, you use that as evidence that you're failing. Small, consistent steps create the path. Milarepa didn't build all the towers in one day. He carried 1 stone at a time, and eventually the accumulation of those single stones transformed him completely. This teaching can feel hard if you're exhausted right now. If you're already running on empty, the idea of daily practice might sound like one more demand, one more thing you're failing at. If that's where you are, know this: even listening to this is practice. Even considering these ideas is effort. You don't have to implement everything perfectly or start a rigorous practice tomorrow. But maybe, when you're ready, you could choose 1 small thing. 1 moment each day where you practice being different than you've been. Not perfect, just different. Not everything at once, just this one thing. And then show up for it tomorrow. And the day after. Not because you're trying to become someone better or more worthy, but because you're learning what Milarepa learned. That showing up repeatedly with patient effort creates transformation that dramatic gestures never could. The path isn't walked in giant leaps. It's walked one step at a time, one stone carried at a time, one breath at a time. And those small steps, accumulated over days and months and years, take you further than you can imagine from where you are right now. You've probably heard some version of this. You attract what you believe you deserve. Your energy creates your reality. If you're experiencing negativity, it's because you're vibrating at a low frequency. It's everywhere now. This idea that the universe is essentially a cosmic vending machine responding to your thoughts, your beliefs, your vibrational frequency. Think positive thoughts and positive things happen. Believe you're worthy, and worthiness manifests. Visualize success, and success appears. And implicit in all of this is a darker message. If bad things are happening to you, it's your fault. You must not be believing hard enough, vibrating high enough, manifesting correctly enough. Your suffering is proof that you're doing something wrong. Buddhism says something entirely different. And honestly, it's more compassionate, more realistic, and ultimately more empowering than the manifestation myth. The Buddha taught about karma, yes. But karma doesn't mean what most modern spiritual teachers claim it means. It's not cosmic justice, not the universe rewarding good people and punishing bad ones, not a system where you get what you deserve based on your vibration or beliefs. Karma means action. That's it. The word literally translates to action or deed. What you do has consequences. Not because the universe is watching and judging, but because actions naturally lead to results. Plant a seed and a plant grows, not as reward, just as natural consequence. Touch fire and you get burned, not as punishment, just as cause and effect. Some consequences are immediate and obvious. You speak harshly to someone, they pull away from you. You practice patience, relationships become easier. Cause and effect, visible and direct. But many consequences take time to ripen. Seeds planted today might not sprout for months or years. Actions from years ago might be bearing fruit now in ways you don't recognize or connect back to their source. And here's the part that the manifestation crowd conveniently leaves out. You're not starting from a blank slate. You're born into conditions you didn't create. Your parents, your country, your body, your economic circumstances, none of these were chosen by you. None of them reflect your deserving or not deserving. You inherit the consequences of countless actions taken by countless people before you were even born. This is what the Buddha meant by dependent origination. Everything arises from multiple causes and conditions, most of which are beyond your control or even your awareness. You didn't choose to be born into war or peace, poverty or wealth, health or illness. You didn't manifest your genetic predispositions, your early childhood experiences, the historical moment you're living in. These conditions shape your life profoundly, and pretending otherwise is just privileged delusion. Rain falls on everyone, on the kind and the cruel, on those who meditate and those who don't, on those who believe they deserve sunshine and those who believe they deserve storms. The rain doesn't check your vibration before deciding whether to fall. The Buddha said this explicitly in the Dhammapada. The rain cloud pours down on all alike. Good things happen to harmful people. Terrible things happen to kind people. This is reality, not some cosmic mistake that needs explaining away. So, if you're going through something difficult right now, you can stop the exhausting work of trying to figure out what you did wrong to manifest this. You can stop blaming yourself for not believing hard enough, or vibrating high enough, or maintaining positive thoughts consistently enough. Maybe you didn't do anything wrong. Maybe you're just experiencing the reality that difficult things happen to everyone sometimes, that you're subject to conditions beyond your control, that being human means being vulnerable to illness, loss, disappointment, and death. This isn't pessimism. It's honesty. And there's enormous relief in it. The manifestation teaching puts all responsibility for your circumstances on you, while simultaneously making you helpless. If your thoughts create reality, then you must control your thoughts perfectly, at all times, must never doubt or fear or struggle, must maintain positive vibration constantly, or risk manifesting disaster. It's exhausting, and it doesn't work, which then becomes more evidence that you're failing, which creates more anxiety, which lowers your vibration, which is why things aren't working. A perfect, self-fulfilling spiral of blame. The Buddha's teaching is different. Yes, your actions matter. What you do has consequences. But you're not responsible for everything that happens to you. You're not manifesting every circumstance, and you're not being cosmically punished when life is hard. You're just living in a world where countless conditions are constantly interacting in ways far too complex for any individual to control. Here's what you can control: your actions and your responses. When something happens, whether you caused it or not, whether you deserve it or not, you can choose how you respond. That choice, that action will have consequences. Those consequences will ripple out in ways you may or may not see. You can't control whether you get sick, but you can control whether you treat your body with care or neglect. You can't control whether someone loves you, but you can control whether you speak truthfully and act with integrity in your relationships. You can't control outcomes, but you can control your intentions and actions. This is where real power lives, not in trying to manifest specific results through force of belief, but in taking responsibility for what's actually in your control and releasing what isn't. The manifestation teaching says, control your thoughts to control your life. Buddhism says, you can't control life, but you can work with it wisely. One leads to anxiety and self-blame. The other leads to agency within realistic limits. Think about the people telling you that you attract what you believe you deserve. Notice how often they're people whose circumstances are already comfortable, whose basic needs are met, who have the luxury of believing their success came purely from their positive thinking rather than from a complex web of privilege, timing, and conditions they didn't create. It's easy to believe you manifested your good life when you're not facing systemic oppression, generational poverty, chronic illness, or any of the countless conditions that make life genuinely difficult, regardless of how positive your thoughts are. The Buddha didn't teach manifestation because he looked at reality honestly. He saw that suffering touches everyone, that conditions are complex, that we don't control nearly as much as we think we do. But he also saw that within those constraints, we have genuine choices. We can't choose everything that happens to us, but we can choose how we meet it. We can't control outcomes, but we can plant seeds through our actions and trust that some of them will sprout, even if we can't predict which ones or when. This is more honest than manifestation teachings, and it's ultimately more freeing. You don't have to maintain perfect positivity or risk ruining your life. You don't have to pretend everything that happens is somehow your fault or your creation. You can acknowledge that life is complex, conditions are beyond your control, and sometimes things are just hard for reasons that have nothing to do with your worthiness or your vibrational frequency. And in acknowledging that, you can focus your actual energy on what actually matters, your actions, your responses, the choices you make in each moment about how you'll meet whatever life is presenting. That's karma, not cosmic justice, but the simple reality that what you do matters, even though it doesn't determine everything. So stop trying to manifest your way out of difficulty. Stop blaming yourself for conditions you inherited. Stop pretending you can control the universe through positive thinking. Instead, ask, Given these circumstances, how can I act with integrity? Given this difficulty, how can I respond with wisdom instead of reactivity? Given that I can't control outcomes, what seeds can I plant through my actions today? That's where your actual power lives. Not in manifestation, but in wise action within the reality you're actually in. We've walked through a lot together over these hours. We started with that feeling of exhaustion, that sense of never being quite enough, and we've explored where that feeling actually comes from, not from your inadequacy, but from believing in a fixed self that needs defending, proving, valuing. We looked at how the mind creates stories about pain, and how those stories often hurt more than the pain itself. We explored what happens when you stop explaining yourself to people who've already decided not to understand. We examined the difference between compassion that depletes you and compassion that flows from fullness. We talked about attention and where it goes, about choosing your companions wisely, about the precepts as a form of self-care rather than rules to follow. We explored non-clinging, caring deeply without grasping so tightly you strangle what you're trying to hold. We sat with wounds and discovered they don't define you, even when they're real. We learned about emotional storms and the stillness beneath them. We looked at the difference between comfort and transformation, at karma without the cosmic justice myth. Every section was circling the same question from different angles. Who are you when you're not defending yourself, proving yourself, or seeking something outside yourself to complete you? And the answer that keeps appearing is this: you're the awareness that witnesses all of it, the thoughts, the feelings, the stories, without being defined by any of it. When you stop trying to value yourself, when you see through that entire game, life doesn't suddenly become perfect. You don't transcend all difficulty or rise above all pain. Rain still falls. Loss still happens. Things still break and people still leave, and you still make mistakes. But something shifts. Life becomes lighter somehow, more spacious, more real. You don't need everyone to like you, because you're not trying to be anyone in particular. You don't need to prove anything, because there's no fixed self that needs defending. You can let the waves crash on the surface while resting in the depth. This isn't one and done teaching where you hear it once and never struggle again. You'll forget everything we've talked about. That's not failure. It's just how minds work. Everyone forgets. The feeling of not enough will return, probably many times. When it does, remember, it's just a feeling arising, just a thought pattern running its familiar course. It's not true. It never was. Come back to these teachings whenever you need to. Listen again. Take what serves you. Let the rest go. The path unfolds slowly, in its own time, through countless small moments of remembering, rather than one dramatic realization. The Buddha once said that patience is the highest virtue, that those who are patient will reach the end of the path. Not the smartest or the most disciplined or the most naturally gifted, the most patient. Be patient with yourself as you walk this path. Be patient with the forgetting and the remembering, the falling and the getting back up, the progress that feels invisible until suddenly you notice you're not who you used to be. You're already whole. You've always been whole. The work isn't becoming whole. It's seeing through the illusion that you ever weren't. If you've stayed with this for all 3 hours, thank you. Thank you for trusting these teachings enough to sit with them, for staying present even when it was uncomfortable, for bringing your attention here instead of the 1,000 other places it could have gone. Wherever you are right now, whether it's morning light streaming through your window or the quiet dark of midnight, I hope you found something useful in these words. Maybe it was one story that landed, one teaching that felt true, one moment where something shifted inside you. That's enough. If you'd like, leave a comment below. Even just one word to let us know you were here, that you walked this path with us today. There's something beautiful about knowing we're scattered across the world, yet connected through these teachings. If there's one thing to carry with you, you don't need to become more. The work isn't building your worth or fixing your brokenness. It's seeing through the illusion that you were ever not enough. That seeing takes time. Be patient with yourself. And when you forget, you will forget. Come back to this. Come back to the breath, to the present moment, to the awareness that's been here all along. There are more teachings to explore, more practices to discover. If this resonated, you'll find me here, continuing to share what the Buddha taught about living with less suffering and more peace. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. The path is long, and you're exactly where you need to be.